Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping in to a Pilsner from a brewer I've never had anything from prior. This Pilsner is called Pop Fuji and it's brewed by Brouwerij West. They are based in San Pedro, California. This clocks right in the average range for a Pilsner ABV at 5%. So first thing first, Brouwerij, in case you're curious, it's a Brouwerig. That is the Dutch spelling of the word brewery, though it is pronounced the exact same as German. It is the Dutch spelling. In terms of label art on here, I don't even know what to make of it. It's got some cartoon guy with his hand sticking out, almost like grasping for something with kind of galaxies and stars kind of speckled all over that character there. I'm not sure, but it looks pretty neat. So first beer from a new brewer, and we're kicking off with a Pilsner. A Pilsner, for my money, is always a great test of a brewer. This is a classic style. It's one that appeals to the masses. There's really no tricks or gimmicks, so I'm very excited to jump in. So we're going to get this cracked gently, gently, being the operative word. Oh, I tried. I should have been more gentle. So we've got us a little bit of a mess here. I'm going to go ahead and get this poured in, then I'm going to cut and get this cleaned up just a bit because it's a little over the top. So that's going to settle just a tick. With video editing magic, we'll be right back. All right, so I've gotten my mess cleaned up here. This one definitely got a hold of me. Probably slammed it down on the table and didn't realize as I was getting ready to get this one set. So nonetheless, it settled down a little bit. My mess is all cleaned up. I'm just going to top it off a little bit more here. I think I should be able to get this whole beer in that glass. Yes, I can. There we go, perfect. So visually, this is absolute textbook classic Pilsner. It is that light straw, pale yellow color. And as is typical with Pilsners, it formed this nice, rich, creamy, thick, foamy head on top. I mean, you can see how that sticks to my finger. This would make many a nitro stout blush, just the way that Pilsners form their heads. It looks fantastic. Let's give it a good sniff. So this one smells really good. There's a lot of classic underlying Pilsner aroma, but I could say on this one I'm picking a lot of fruit aromas coming through that, you know, you sometimes get in Pilsners, but not quite as strongly as on this one. It kind of smells like a mix of lemons and fresh ripe apples. That's what I'm getting. And those are two relatively calm if they're going to impart kind of fruity aromatic characters. Those two fruit in particular are pretty common in a Pilsner. But it looks great. It smells great. It's going to make a mess of my beard, but, you know, such is the price we pay for Pilsner. Let's jump in. That's very nice. That is a classic Pilsner profile coming straight through. This one really has a nice bit of bitters. It's not over the top. It's kind of, this beer to me is kind of floating right in the Goldilocks zone for a Pilsner. This is kind of almost a cookie cutter. What is a Pilsner? And you could use this as an example. It's got this kind of doughy and baked good quality to it about the aroma, as well as some slight fruitiness. You take that sip, and most of what you get in the aroma profile is also passed on to the flavor palette. Now, on first sip, the first thing that hits you is a little bit of that bitterness, that hot bite. Kicks pretty hard up front, but it's not ridiculously intense. It's exactly what I would hope for in a Pilsner. That's kind of the area it's sitting, kind of textbook. Right behind that, there's that graininess, that kind of baked good, that bready quality, that crustiness, that biscuit-like quality to it. And then that kind of settles out a little bit, and you're starting to get this slight drying effect on the end of the finish. Now, this one, the pungency of flavor is probably a little bit longer than average, but it's, again, this is kind of right in the middle, Goldilocks zone of what I think of when I think of a well-crafted Pilsner. So it's kind of got a lot going for it in that respect. It's very approachable. Classic Pilsner, it's very refreshing. To that end, I could tell you the dryness on the end comes pretty late, long after the flavors have pretty much dissipated. and it does take, give or take 45 seconds to a minute for that dryness in. It's very subtle on this one. It's a little bit that just kind of drying out the back of the palate. So all in all, very classic textbook Pilsner, very well put together. I'm going to jump in for one more sip. Think on body and mouthfeel here. Very nice light, and any other flavor development of note. The body on this one is a lot more robust than your average Pilsner. This is a weighty Pilsner. I would say it's at least a good solid round medium body. Most Pilsners tend to be quite light, so this has got a lot more breadth to it. In terms of resistance, it's got a little bit more resistance to it as well. Very classic. When you agitate around the palate, it does get quite creamy, so it feels very much the part in that respect, but it's got a lot more weightiness to it and a lot more resistance to it. Though, don't get me wrong, this does not feel like a heavy beer. This is all relative and comparative to another Pilsner, so really quite nice. And again, on second sip, everything that I got on the first sip came through in the exact order of operations, just a little more intensely. So it's that bitterness, that hoppy bite up front, then all of those baked good, crackery, crummy, biscuity, crusty goodness that comes through. And there are these kind of floating little bits of fruitiness. Now, what smells like lemon and apple on the aroma translate in the glass kind of like pear. That's the fruity kind of underlying flavor that I'm getting mixed with all this baked goodness. So it's really very much a classic, well-executed Pilsner here. I can't say I'm disappointed as my first beer from any new brewer. Pilsner, again, a great test of any brewer, and I think they nailed this one. I'm going to take my time to call up my scores. When we come back, we're going to get this beer ranked from top to bottom. Okay, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. Again, this is Brouwerij West's Pop Fuji Pilsner, 5% ABV. Brouwerij West is based in San Pedro, California. So starting with the aroma on this one. The aroma on this one was definitely more pungent than your average Pils. Just missed being top echelon by a tick. I did give the aroma a 9 out of 10. For the taste, as I said, this was almost kind of a classic quintessential what I think of when I think of a Pilsner. And it really, the aroma and the taste, no difference here. The taste, the flavors that came through, very, very nice classic Pilsner. This one, I would have liked, personally, subjectively, an even bigger hop bite from this. But what came through was very much classic Pilsner. All the flavors came through that you would expect. And overall, it was very great. I give it a 9 out of 10. For the body on this one, as I said, was significantly heavier than your average Pilsners. It was a good, solid, full medium, no question about it. Now, subjectively, I like that, but for the style, it was a little heavier than what is the norm. But overall, I still tried to be fair. I gave it above average. I gave it a 7. For the mouthfeel, same story here. Had a lot more resistance than your average Pils, but again, we're comparing this to other Pilsners. It's nowhere near the level of, say, an Imperial Stout or a barley wine. But again, I tried to be fair. I gave it above average. I gave it a 7. For the finish on this one was nice and long, significantly longer than your average. If it had been a little more hop forward like some of the German and Czech ones and American interpretations of those, I think it could have gone even longer, but overall, this was well above average. Finish does get an 8 out of 10. Head and retention, as you saw, it was textbook Pilsner. It did it beautifully. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the appearance, yet again, this was textbook Pilsner, that pale straw yellow. It gets a 10 out of 10 here as well. For the balance, overall, I really enjoyed the balance of the beer. My subjective wishes aside, this was very much a textbook Pilsner, and I think they nailed the balance in putting this one together. It gets a 10 out of 10. Feeling the intangible, I loved it. Pilsners are great, and this one was executed exceptionally well. It gets a 10 out of 10 from me. Finally, is an example of the style. Overall, this is just a quintessential classic, great example of what a Pilsner is. I docked 1 point here just because it had a few things that were outside of the norm, notably the body and the mouthfeel. But aside from that, it was pretty much what you expect a Pilsner to be and done very well at that. Example of the style does get a 9 out of 10, which brings the total score on Brouwerij West's Pop Fuji to an 89 out of 100. So this is definitely an above average Pilsner. I think this is one that would be accessible to anybody that's a regular craft Pilsner drinker. You're not going to be upset by grabbing this beer and cracking it, and it is just as refreshing as you would hope it would be. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live to YouTube, just click the notification bell icon. It is right next to the subscribe button. Till next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.